Alright class, welcome to video 3 on section 9-2. I think it's video 3. I'm just going to keep on reading on page 229. I want you to follow along with your eyes on the figure on the previous page about the electron transport chain. Which one am I talking about? I'm talking about this one right here. See, there we go. I'm going to be reading about B, hydrogen ion movement. Every time two high-energy electrons transported down the electron transport chain, their energy is used to transport hydrogen ions across the membrane. During electron transport, hydrogen ions build up in the intermembrane space, making it positively charged. The other side of the membrane, from which those H+ ions have been taken, is now negatively charged. C. Now we're on number C. Where is number C? ATP production, right here. How does the cell use the charge differences that build up as a result of the electron transport? The inner membrane of the mitochondria contains a protein spheres called ATP synthase. As hydrogen ions escape through the channels into these proteins, ATP synthase spin. Each time it rotates, enzymes grab a low-energy ADP and attaches a phosphate, forming high-energy ATP. The beauty of this system is the way in which it couples the movement of high-energy electrons with the production of ATP. Every time a pair of high-energy electrons moves down the electron transport chain, the energy is used to move hydrogen ions across the membrane. These ions then rush back across the membrane, producing enough force to spin ATP synthase and generate enormous amounts of ATP. On average, each pair of high-energy electrons that moves down the electron transport chain provides enough energy to produce 3 molecules of ATP from ADP. Checkpoint. What is the role of ATP synthase in cellular respiration? What is the role of ATP synthase in cellular respiration? It's right here. ATP synthase uses the pressure, the flow of extra hydrogen ions in the intermembrane space, right here, as they flow back into the mitochondria's matrix to spin and turn ADP into ATP. That's the role of ATP synthase. The totals. But before we move on to the totals, let's look at our objectives again. Explain how high-energy electrons are used by the electron transport chain. Well, let's see if we can do that. Well, high-energy electrons enter the chain, and as they're passed along, their energy is used to pump hydrogen ions into the inner membrane space. Those ions then flood right back through ATP synthase, making ATP. If you don't get that, you should go back and read a little bit more of what we just read. Let's move on to the totals. How much chemical energy does cellular respiration yield from a single molecule of glucose? Recall that glucose produces just 2 ATP molecules Recall that glycolysis produces just 2 ATP molecules per glucose. In the absence of oxygen, that's all the energy the cell can extract from each molecule of glucose. In the presence of oxygen, everything changes. As in figure 9.8 shows, the Krebs cycle and electron transport chain enable the cell to produce 34 more ATP molecules per glucose molecule, in addition to the 2 ATP molecules obtained from glycolysis. This means that 18 times as much ATP can be generated from glucose in the presence of oxygen. The final wastes of cellular respiration are water and carbon dioxide. How efficient is the process of cellular respiration? Before we continue to talk about that, let's look at our picture here. Glucose. Where did glucose come from? It came from photosynthesis, which used light energy to turn carbon dioxide into sugar. All right. Glucose is broken down into 2 ATP and you get 2 pyruvic acid. Right here is if you don't have oxygen, that's where it stops, and all you get is 4 ATP. Sorry, that's all you get. You don't even get those. But with oxygen, those NADHs can go into the mitochondria and do the electron transport chain. Finally, the pyruvic acid can go into the Krebs cycle, right here, and produce all kinds of NADH and FADH, which then can move into the electron transport chain and make ATP. The total's 36 ATP. Wow! Plus the 2 from here. Awesome. Makes a total of 38. How efficient is the process? The 36 molecules that the cell makes per glucose represents about 38% of the total energy from glucose. That means that 38% of the possible energy is obtained in ATP. That might not seem like much, but it means the cell is actually more efficient at using food than the engine of a typical automobile is at burning gasoline. What happens to the remaining 62%? It is released as heat, which is one of the reasons your body feels warmer after vigorous exercise. Right. Guys, 38% is huge. Like, some of the best gasoline engines can't really get above 12%. And if they're lucky, it's 12%. Whew! Awesome! Okay, let's move on to the next video, please.